Hi everyone. So Danny Katz here with Coperg. We're doing another Talking Utilities video, and this time with Joe Pereira, who works with the Utility Consumer Advocate. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today, as part of Talking Utilities, we wanted to dig into a little bit more gas bills, and in particular, for a lot of people, utilities, they provide electricity, but they also provide gas to heat our homes, to cook our food, and so we're coming out of winter, and we wanted to talk a little bit about, for a lot of us, our gas bills went up, or in terms of our utility bills, and so wanted to just dive in a little bit more. You're a consumer advocate, so kind of walk through how what are the factors that go into these gas bills and highlight some of the decisions that are going to be coming up at the Public Utilities Commission that people might be able to weigh in on as well. So that's the main topic. But for folks who don't know, we've done a whole video about what the Public Utilities Commission is, and I'll put a link to that down below here. But the utility consumer advocate, if people have never heard of that before, what is your office? What's your role in this utility space?
Thanks, Danny. Well, as you said, my name is Joe Pereira. I'm the director of the Colorado Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate. So, what is the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate? We are a small, independent government agency that was created in 1984, kind of on the heels of the energy crisis and monopoly development and skyrocketing prices at energy prices at the time. And so an office like ours were created all over the country to represent the public interest and generally residential, small business, and agricultural customers before the PUC, federal agencies like the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Department of Energy, and the courts. And so that's what we do here in Colorado. We represent customers before the PUC in rate cases, lots of different gas and electric cases all around planning and ultimately what lands on a customer's bill.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're strong supporters of your office. I mean, every few years you come up for review at the legislature, and so to us, I mean, utility decisions are so complicated. Essentially your office, helps to ensure that there's some expertise weighing in on utility decisions with kind of that consumer perspective. That's sort of how I understand it. Does that ring true to you?
That's right. On a day-to-day basis, we're focused on the rates and charges that are passed on to customers and how that relates to the state's decarbonization goals and other priorities of the legislature.
Yeah. So on one hand, making sure that, the investments that utilities are making are, smart, cost effective, whatever the right adjective is there, but then also making sure we're on pace to hit our state goals around reducing pollution. So, making sure that we're balancing that equation in a way that's good for consumers.
That's right. I like to say, we're in charge of advocating to find the most affordable path to the state's goals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned small office. I mean, it's not like two of you though. You've got some people there. Like, give us a sense of how big your office is.
Our office has 14 full-time employees. This can range at any time given hiring and whatnot. And then we have five staff or legal staff from the Attorney General's office and another paralegal associated. So,
Yeah,
at our biggest, 20 people that are fighting this fight, and
yeah,
sometimes it's less.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, you introduced yourself as the director. That's a fairly new position. I guess you've been here though for a while. Why are you motivated to do the work that you do? How did you get into this space?
Sure. So I served as deputy director for 6 years before recently being appointed as director. I think at my core is a drive for public service. So I've worked in the public sector for more than a decade, and I've been focused on energy and environmental issues throughout my career. And so I've always kind of had a perspective or a bend for, how do these policies and how do this decisions around energy get made, and ultimately how do they affect the regular citizens' lives. And so, I've just really been, attracted to advocacy work in that area, and this is the perfect fit to do that.
That's great. That's great. Well, today we want to dig in a little bit more on the gas side of things for utilities. And I was thinking this is a good topic because we're coming off of a winter, and even though it was quite a warm winter for us, there's still a lot of us who had, our heat going throughout that winter. And I think a number of us noticed, bills going up, and I thought it'd be a good time to help people understand like what's the factors that go into what we ultimately pay when it comes to our gas utility. It's not like we can shop around, so we really are sort of dependent on advocates like you and others to weigh in and make sure that the right decisions are being made in terms of the investments. And so I like as Copert's been doing advocacy in this space, I sort of think of it as there's kind of two big steps when a utility wants to spend invest in the gas side of the equation. The first is like the first question is just how much is there going to be an investment? And then the second is how much will ratepayers pay, us customers pay for that. So it feels like it should be one decision, but it actually plays out kind of in two big steps. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. There's a continuum, where we start with planning all the way to cost recovery. And so I think, what you just described, really illustrates kind of that there's a long process, but ultimately, ends up on all these decisions landing on a customer's bill.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, so when it comes to this space, as the consumer advocate, you participate in the Public Utilities Commission space. We have dozens of utilities in Colorado, but you're mostly weighing in on decisions that deal with the for-profit utilities in Colorado. Is that right?
That's right. There are five regulated gas and electric utilities, and so that's where we spend most of our time. There is some efforts with the large electric co-op tri-state, but for the most part, we're focused on Xcel Energy, Black Hills, Atmos Energy, and Colorado Natural Gas.
All right. Well, let's use Xcel Energy as an example here because I know that they've got a couple of proposals before the Public Utilities Commission. I believe they have kind of that initial proposal, the like, what are we going to do? What are we going to spend? What's our plan for the coming years? They have a proposal that should be, decided pretty soon. And then there's also, I believe, a rate case as well. So if we focus in on them, I guess, can you give us kind of a big picture on the first step that I believe it's called the gas infrastructure plan? So I think Xcel has proposed something to the Public Utilities Commission for approval. Can you kind of walk through what have they proposed? And as a consumer advocate, what are you kind of weighing in on? What are you looking for in this plan and what the PUC should decide?
Sure. As you mentioned, the planning process is called the gas infrastructure plan. Each regulated gas utility has to file this plan every 2 years. Up until this year, these have been in informational filings. And so Xcel has filed their first litigated proceeding. This is, an official plan, so to speak, where the company makes a proposal for its future infrastructure investments and asks the commission for approval of those investments. Those can be anything from safety and integrity projects to capacity upgrades, which are maybe neighborhoods need more infrastructure as they grow, and as well as new business projects. And so the commission is looking at this plan and examining, are the assumptions that the utility is making here, do those seem accurate? Is the spending level that's proposed here appropriate with what you might expect to meet the state's goals and the growth that's associated with it? Are there specific projects at certain dollar amounts, say a $3 million threshold, that need to be examined? And then also, are there other alternatives to putting new pipes in the ground that the utility might explore to mitigate some of the costs related to the plan overall.
Yeah. And so we talk about costs. I mean, the state, obviously you're looking at this and you said, making sure that there's a financial cost component to this, making sure we're spending dollars wisely. But there's also a cost in terms of the cost of a gas infrastructure being the either the safety component, so gas can, is combustible. There's a safety component there. But then there's also an air pollution component too. So the state has some goals to reduce our reliance on gas. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of the space you're working within, the rules that you're working within there?
Sure. So the state legislature has established sector-wide greenhouse gas reduction goals. And so ultimately, it's up to each utility to make proposals that put them on a pathway to meet those goals. This has been done on the electric side and on the gas side. In gas planning, this is fairly new, and it's a bit more of a difficult lift, given that gas infrastructure, often lasts 40 to 60 years. And so when you see, these types of plans proposed, what you're doing is you're trying to balance the cost of the infrastructure, the growing need for gas around the Front Range with Excel, for example, as well as knowing that there are goals, greenhouse gas goals that the state needs to meet. And so, how does the commission and how do the utility propose and approve a plan that, rightly meets customer needs, but also, doesn't leave customers with stranded assets in the future um, should parts of the system need to be pruned down, or different alternatives for heating, you know, accelerate in a way that there aren't many customers left on the system, or that gas investments that are made now might not be needed in the future.
Yeah, so stranded assets, you mostly if we're building new gas infrastructure now, but we're also trying to reduce our reliance on gas, how do we avoid some of that? How do we avoid spending money on new infrastructure that we're not going to need in 5 or 10 years, even if that infrastructure could last 50 or 60 years? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's right, because those pipes have to be paid for somehow. And so
Yeah,
customers will always foot that bill. It becomes a big problem when, these costs carry forward to a, presumed shrinking customer base,
yeah,
especially if we see a lot of customers moving toward the electric side for heating. That leaves a smaller and smaller customer base to pay for, larger and larger pools of investment. And so
yeah,
when the commission is looking at the gas infrastructure plan, they're doing it with that kind of underlying tension, and trying to get the utility to make smart and efficient investments to avoid that future situation. Our
yeah.
office is obviously advocating for, strong oversight, and conscious decision making around that predicament.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And, I think for a lot of people who maybe have had heat, gas heat their whole lives, it might be hard to picture, oh, what do I do if it's not gas? It seems, I mean, we've been advocating for a while that the technology has advanced significantly on the electric heat side. Some people may have heard of the word heat pumps. Yeah, that there is the technology in place right now that for many people could make a switch over to electric heat in particular. And so, I think it's those kinds of things that we're hoping more and more people are able to do to be able to help us hit our goals. And utilities can play a role in that, right? To help incentivize that, help make it easier for people to make that transition.
That's right. And especially with the utility like Excel, where most of its customers receive both electric and gas. And so what we see now is, utility incentivizing transition toward electricity. So whether that's for heating or for transportation. But we also see some like pretty strong business as usual investment on the gas side. And so for
Mm.
customers, this is a real tension in that, you know, dollars are going out the door to really support electricity transition and movement toward electricity, but also maybe a reluctance from the utility to stop investing on the gas side, largely, you know, because that's how a utility makes money. And so
Yeah, yeah,
our office is really, as I mentioned, has a concern around stranded assets, but is really trying to create advocacy that, you know, balances um, these two sectors as well, and, you know, as to kind of not double spend for customers, and really
yeah.
kind of create a vision and direction for, you know, how the utility is going to look in the future.
Yeah. All right. So we've sort of hinted at that there's a proposal before the Public Utilities Commission from Excel. Again, we're using this kind of an example to see how you kind of walk through this process. So Excel has a proposal before the PUC. We expect the PUC will be making a decision, sometime soon. What were you advocating for? What are you looking for in this proposal? I mean, what changes were you suggesting to the PUC to, protect consumers?
Sure. Largely, our advocacy was focused on, you know, a technical but important aspect of gas planning, which is around how cold they the cold in which they plan their system around. So,
Okay.
um, in a unique way, gas utilities do planning to make sure, and I think rightly so, that they can deliver gas to all of their customers on the coldest day of the year. And they use history and weather and all of this data to make that determination. How that methodology plays out is a matter of argument. And so the utility, in our view, proposes modeling and a plan that um, pushes toward more investment on their side. And, you know, we take a perspective that, you know, a different methodology might arrive at a more efficient plan that would lead to less costs for customers. In addition, the utility will propose, uh, a list of 2 to 5 projects that they have coming up in the next few years to upgrade their system, to build out into a new area of the Front Range. And in that case, you know, we are looking at, are these right-sized projects? Are there alternatives to putting, you know, pipes in the ground for new neighborhoods for these projects, which wouldn't put us in potentially that stranded asset um, project? And then we're, you know, looking at, you know, how can the utility continue to adjust its processes on a continuum to ultimately get to, you know, easier decisions about, should we put pipes in the ground or should we, you know, electrify? And so a lot of this advocacy is technical and probably not
Yeah.
the most interesting
Yeah.
for customers, but ultimately it's really about, how do you build an efficient system in the context of a transitioning energy sector.
Yeah. So if I hear what you're saying, one of the things, as our climate is warming and as it's doing that, if a utility is assuming we're going to have colder days than we're actually going to have, they might build more gas infrastructure than we would likely need. So you're advocating to make sure that the assumptions on the essentially the weather forecasts are accurate. Is that what you were talking about in terms of that piece of it?
That's right. Some methodologies may reach back 50 years and look at weather and temperature and the different swings. And it may be that long of a time period isn't necessarily appropriate, given some of the changes in climate that we've seen it here in Colorado and on the Front Range. And so, you know, maybe a shorter window that captures more days like we see today
Yeah.
uh, is better for planning. And so
Yeah.
that's, for example, one of the advocacy positions that we took.
Yeah. And then you were talking about, I've heard this term non-pipeline alternatives. It sounds like that's what you were also talking about is can we make sure that if there's proposals to expand the gas system in other ways, could there be an alternative to that that doesn't involve gas pipelines that might be a better use of dollars, both short term and long term? Were there a few of those in this gas infrastructure plan that you were saying, hey, we think this might not be the best use of dollars?
There were, and I think I would point it in two areas. One would be around capacity expansion, but surprisingly, there should be some examination on the safety and integrity side of things as well.
Okay.
And so, what we conventionally see is for both safety replacement and capacity replacement, the answer for those problems from a utility is replace the pipe, upsize the pipe.
Hmm.
And on the safety side, what different parties have been saying is there are lots of solutions to plugging leaks and replacing new infrastructure or extending the life of older infrastructure besides just pipe replacement, which I already mentioned might be need to be paid for 40 or 60 years. And so been, asking the commission to consider those types of alternatives. And on the capacity expansion side, looking at, hey, maybe there are other more cost-effective ways than pipe replacement to get customers to reduce their gas usage. Some of this would be traditional demand side management or energy
Yeah.
efficiency. Others might be around cost allocation. So, what we've seen some large projects recently up in the mountains point out the need for capacity expansion, but that's largely based on um, growing use of natural gas for snowmelt on driveways and backyard fireplaces and hot tubs. And so maybe all customers uh, shouldn't have to pay for those upgrades, and maybe only the customers that are causing those would pay for that. And that's a way to send a price signal to say, hey, are you really sure that you want to heat your driveway with natural gas, or
Yeah.
can you find another alternative? And
Yeah.
so in that case, it may be more cost effective to do other things than, build more pipes or put a compressed natural gas plant in the mountains.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the demand side work because I mean it does seem like at the before you launch into building new stuff, I mean ask do we even need to use as much as we're using now? And there are so many efficiencies. I mean, I don't know if it's as simple as this, but there's a lot of homes that are pretty inefficient. And if we could just make those homes, seal some windows and seal some cracks, I mean, it feels like a small thing, but there's so many of those things. Make sure that, just increase efficiencies that adds up. And every time we do that, then we don't have to build new capacity. I mean, is that the kind of stuff you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I think on the natural gas side, there's kind of a win-win around energy efficiency. What we know is that for homeowners, the most cost-effective energy efficiency investments are on the natural gas side. So air sealing your home, uh, insulating or your windows in the winter, weather stripping, all of those things have a very positive return for customers. And so there's a direct win on your energy bill, as well as those avoid the need for more gas investment, which ultimately ends up on your bill as well. And so making sure we optimize energy efficiency on the natural gas side is of high importance because of this, double win for customers.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we've talked a lot about this kind of first step. So, there's this, PUC has a proposal. You've come in, others have come in, we've submitted comments. And so at some point, the PUC is going to say, all right, here's the decision. We approve Excel to move forward and spend money in these ways and in this size. But it doesn't actually say how much we as customers will pay. That's a second process. Is that right?
That's right. When a utility has made investments, that happens on a bit of a lag. So they use cash flow that they have available to generally fund investments. And when it's time to true up or come back and um, get get the revenue that it needs to pay for those costs, it files what's called a rate case. And a rate case is essentially the utilities request for approval from the commission for its cost of doing business and returns for its investors.
And so we kind of have a sneak peek of the future because at the same time that we're approving that the PUC should be, approving a gas infrastructure plan, there is also a rate case going on. It's not for this infrastructure plan, but it's for a previous decision, right?
That's right. Excel has filed a gas rate case and it's before the commission now. And in that rate case, what it's doing is it's looking to collect, or as I said, true up on the investments that it's made since its last rate case. And it's asking to move those investments into what is called base rates. And so I mentioned all those pipes need to be paid for over, X amount of years. And this is the way they do that through your rates. And so this request will put forward its investments. It will adjust their operations and maintenance costs. It'll adjust the profits for its shareholders and ultimately land on a rate that will cover its costs until its next rate case.
Yeah.
And a lot of the expenses that have been reviewed in past GIPs, gas infrastructure plans, are now rolling into rates. And so the commission will give a review and determine if those investments were prudent. If they were, then those will be rolled into rates, and then our bills will be adjusted accordingly.
Is this rate case, is it simple enough for you to be able to say the proposal is that bills will go up by X%, or you can't really boil it down like that at this stage?
At the beginning of the case, the utility is required to notice or provide to the public and to the commission its projected rate increase associated with the case. In Excel's most recent rate case filing, they are projecting a bill increase of somewhere around 10%. We don't know where this case will land or where the commission will land on that adjustment.
Yeah.
And so usually what happens in a rate case is parties put forward advocacy and say, these investments don't meet the threshold of prudency. The return that the company is asking for shareholders is too much. The capital structure in which the company proposes to fund all of these investments is too equity rich, and we would like those adjusted. And usually that 10% might go down to a 6 or 7% rate increase. One of the challenges with the rate increase is that many of the investments have already been made,
Right.
and they're in the ground, and so a lot of those costs, I wouldn't say are baked in, but have a lot to do with the adjustment that's being made. And so things like return are generally more argued over than the actual investments that have been made in that proceeding.
Yeah. I mean, and it is somewhat reasonable, like in that if a utility's gone through a process to get approval for a set of things they're going to spend money on, they will come back and expect to make, be able to, get money back for those investments. So it does feel like, I guess saying it a different way, if the only time you weigh in is on the actual rate cases, you're missing a key moment, which is that first decision, which is the kind of overall infrastructure plan. Does that sound right?
I think that's right. We develop and spend a lot of resources on these planning processes for just that reason.
Yeah.
because once the investment is made and built, and then those are moved into rates, there's very little adjustment that can be made. And so it's really important that the commission lands on, the most efficient and reasonable decision in the planning process in
Yeah.
order to try to mitigate rates on the rate case side.
Yeah. So then one final thing, the complication in all this. So we're mostly talking about infrastructure, which is, it's the pipes, it's the ways that the gas is getting to our homes if we still have gas heated homes. But I think a lot of people have also, I mean, we're talking right now, there's a war in the Middle East. There's, lots of stories about gas prices going up. A lot of our bills may be going up because, gas is a commodity and the price of gas is going up. For the most part, utilities like Excel, they're just passing that fuel cost on to us. And so that's less what's being debated in these PUC hearings, right? And it's more this infrastructure piece and less the actual price on the commodity market. Can you help explain that?
That's right. Generally, the cost of the commodity itself is passed through directly to customers. We have a mechanism here in Colorado um, that is designed to mitigate some of the volatility that we see around natural gas. And this harkens back to several years ago, Winter Storm Uri, where we saw, in some cases, the price of natural gas go up 10x, and then those costs get passed on to customers. But this planning process, these rate cases are generally just focused on the infrastructure, and we have a whole other process for the commodity side. As I
Yeah.
mentioned, we're really focused on the elements of doing business, the infrastructure, the operations and maintenance costs, and then the returns for investors.
Yeah. It does, though, I think for us as an advocate, underscore that to the extent that we can help people transition off of gas to a electric heated home, not only is that going to have big pollution benefits, but you do reduce your reliance or your exposure to a fuel that, is the price of which is oftentimes out of our control as little old Colorado.
We definitely see less volatility on the fuel side in the electric sector. We've seen, the price of coal go up and down over the years, and certainly natural gas has been the most volatile commodity. And so, that's where, if we're looking to reduce volatility, movement of customers to the electric side, helps smooth, I think, some of the ups and downs related to fuel costs.
Yeah, yeah. So I ended this, I talked to the Public Utilities Commission and asked them, how important is it for people to weigh in on these rate cases? They emphasize very important here. I mean, you have a front row seat in these decision-making processes. If somebody's at home watching this and wants to weigh in and tell their story on how it's important, why these decisions are important and how it impacts them. I mean, do you find that those stories are helpful, maybe even for you all in your advocacy work?
I can't underscore enough how important it is for the Public Utilities Commission to hear from everyday ratepayers. As you can tell, we think we have the technical side covered, but the commission really needs to hear about what is the day-to-day experience of the average ratepayer. What is it like for an elderly customer on a fixed income, and what does price volatility mean? What does it mean for, a struggling low income customer, and how do these impacts on your bill affect your everyday life? But also, we hear more and more from, what you would kind of term middle class or upper class customers on the stresses that energy increases are causing for their households. And so it's important to hear from everyone, and how decisions in their homes are made around, paying the electric and gas bill probably first. And what does that mean for their day-to-day lives? And what we know is that this commission has been really responsive to to hearing from customers. And so
Yeah.
again, I can't underscore enough. We want to hear, and the commission wants to hear from customers. And we tend to try to make sure that our advocacy reflects the needs of these customers as well. And so all the feedback we can get from ratepayers, matters, and it's important to the process.
That's great. Well, I'll put a link to, ways that people can weigh in our blog that we'll do connected to this video. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to add in about just, if somebody at home is wondering how are all these decisions made? Is there anything that we didn't talk about you want to make sure people understand?
Well, I think it's again important that if customers are interested, that there are resources out there for them to reach out to and learn and understand the process. These are at the Public Utilities Commission and on their website. We also have resources on our website. And if customers want to reach out and have questions to the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, they can do so. We're happy to touch base, whether it's on large general questions or specific needs or challenges they have with their utility. And we will do our best to be responsive to those and assist customers where we can, do outreach where we can, and shape our advocacy if these are issues that really impact the larger customer class.
Great. Well, I'll put a link to your information too in our blog, in your office. Appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, and hopefully we'll do another one of these on another one of these topics. So thanks, Joe, for your time.
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to chatting again.
Excellent.